Welcome to Naked History. You're listening to Unearthed.
The Valley of the Kings. An underground maze of ancient Egyptian tombs carved out over 3,000 years ago. And the final resting place of the famed boy king, Tutankhamun.
When he found the tomb of the King Tut, it was fantastic.
And no discovery, then or since, has ever had the excitement that King Tut's did.
Today, teams are working inside Tutankhamun's tomb to unearth its mysteries.
Even today, every time we turn around, we find more questions to ask.
Why is the tomb of Tutankhamun so unique? And how did it stay hidden for over 3,000 years? To find out, we will venture inside the Valley of the Kings. Blowing it apart, we'll explore its hidden chambers and golden coffins to reveal the secrets at the heart of this ancient wonder. By the banks of the River Nile, hidden in a labyrinth of rock, lies a monumental ancient burial site. The Valley of the Kings. Extending deep beyond giant stone entrances, dozens of subterranean tombs became the final resting place for powerful Egyptian pharaohs.
The Valley of the Kings was in use as a royal burial place for about 500 years. The primary concern was that the pharaoh's body be protected, that it could survive, could endure for an eternity.
Today, teams from around the world use the latest scanning and forensic technology to unearth the secrets of these subterranean chambers. Beneath this valley lie more than 60 hidden tombs carved deep into the rock. Most are similar in design. They're snaking tunnels descending towards the underworld, creating a rabbit warren of hundreds of painted chambers, filled with hieroglyphs and paintings of the afterlife. Hidden near the center lies the tomb of the most famous pharaoh of all, King Tutankhamun. This mysterious chamber is unlike any royal tomb in the valley and puzzles archaeologists to this day. Tutankhamun's tomb lies at the heart of the valley, surrounded by the tombs of the great pharaohs that came before and after him. Today, Tutankhamun is the most famous name of all these ancient kings. But during his lifetime, historians believe he was insignificant.
He was a kid, 9, 10, 11 years old, the little-known, relatively minor pharaoh.
Yet Tutankhamun's tomb transformed his fate.
This young boy king became one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptological history.
Kent Weeks has spent 40 years studying the Valley of the Kings. Kent and teams of archaeologists are working to resolve a crucial mystery. How did Tutankhamun's tomb transform the boy king from a minor pharaoh to one of the most celebrated men in history? Kent believes the first clue lies in how the tombs in the valley are decorated. He wants to understand why the imagery in Tut's tomb is so different to those belonging to more powerful pharaohs.
Royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, they all follow pretty much the same standard rules, contain the same standard scenes. But the tomb of Tutankhamun is unusual.
Kent heads to a different tomb, belonging to the great king Seti II, to investigate how royal tombs are traditionally decorated.
Okay, let's do the other side.
Inside, he forensically records every square inch of the carvings adorning the walls. Many of these artworks show scenes from the important religious text, the Book of the Dead.
Their primary objective was to ensure the safe passage of the pharaoh from this life into the next. This was a major concern to Egyptians. When a pharaoh died, can we be sure the pharaoh is going to have a safe journey into the afterlife? All of the texts, all of the scenes in these tombs are designed to serve those simple functions.
In ancient Egyptian beliefs, the journey to the afterlife begins as the sun sets. The pharaoh takes the route of the sun as it passes down into the underworld. Armed with spells from the walls of the tomb, he faces many challenges, including a lake of fire and a giant serpent. Most Egyptians would then face the most rigorous test, to have their heart weighed against the feather of truth. But the pharaoh was thought to be exempt. When he reaches the end, a parade of gods welcomes him to the afterlife. He is transformed into the sun god, and the sun can rise again. With the spells and prayers on the walls of the tomb acting like a guidebook for the pharaoh, the ancient engravers couldn't make a single mistake.
When you look at these relief carvings, even something as straightforward as columns of hieroglyphic text, the first thing I think that strikes a person is the care, the attention to detail. The birds are meticulously shown. You can identify species of birds from the way they're depicted. The care is important because these texts are important.
Most royal tombs are just as extensively decorated, with incredible attention to detail. But surprisingly, the tomb of Tutankhamun, the most famous tomb in the valley, is far less impressive. Tutankhamun's tomb is just 4 small chambers, each no more than 14 feet wide. At the heart of the tomb is a sparsely decorated burial room, modestly painted and with no carvings. Hidden in the walls, mysterious niches once held sacred statues. A Shabti, to come to life as the pharaoh's servant, and the jackal god of the dead, Anubis. Tutankhamun's burial chamber is filled with magical decoration. But beside it, the rest of the tomb is left bare. This simple tomb is unlike any other royal tomb in the valley.
All of these things conspire to make Tutankhamun's tomb unlike any other in the Valley of the Kings, and we can't be sure why.
Today, Kent has a rare opportunity to study the religious texts inside Tutankhamun's burial chamber up close. He searches for clues that might explain why they're not as elaborate as other pharaohs. Kent works with a team carefully conserving the delicate decoration. Laurie Wong has found mysterious anomalies in the way the ancient walls have been painted.
If we notice here, at the very base of the wall, you can see that there's drips running down. Throughout this tomb, we have drip marks. So it suggests this very fast, fluid action in terms of the application of the painting materials. Also, what's really unusual is that in this small burial chamber, each wall has a slightly different painting technique. It's unusual because one would expect in a small chamber that the painting technology would be the same from wall to wall.
Kent has found something else strange about the imagery in the chamber.
In other tombs, long corridors were filled with column after column after column of religious texts. Here, we have just a few highly abbreviated scenes.
Kent has spotted an illustration of the pharaoh's journey through the underworld, but it's been dramatically simplified.
We have 12 baboons shown here, each in a rectangle, each of them representing one of the 12 hours of the night through which the deceased pharaoh has to pass to achieve immortality.
The key scenes are all there, but the artwork is nowhere near as elaborate as the carvings found in Seti's tomb.
The absence of detail in the religious texts is unusual by any standard.
Kent believes the drip marks and abbreviated religious decoration can only mean one thing.
People were operating under a time constraint here, and that accounts for a lot of the painting, the absence of detail in the religious texts on the wall, the highly abbreviated form of the Book of the Dead. Time was of the essence. For whatever reasons, political or religious or what have you, they did want to get it done quickly.
So why were the painters in such a rush? To find answers, Egyptologists believe a clue lies in the abnormal size of Tutankhamun's tomb. Cavernous chambers and long snaking tunnels are the hallmarks of almost all of the tombs in the valley. Yet the tomb of Tutankhamun is the smallest of all the kings. Why? Most pharaohs of Egypt had colossal tombs to match their power and wealth. One example is the grand tomb of Seti I, a polished masterpiece. Its chambers are incredibly precise, with perfectly aligned pillared halls and raised relief paintings carved onto the walls. Hidden beneath King Seti's burial chamber, a rocky corridor extends over 300 feet down into the bedrock, as deep as the Great Pyramid is high. With 17 immaculately decorated chambers, this vast burial is 6 times larger than the tomb of Tutankhamun. Why is Tutankhamun's tomb so small when Seti's colossal chambers are so large? Could it be the workers didn't have enough time to build something bigger? Egyptologist Catherine Rohrig believes the short life of Tutankhamun might hold the key.
He was about 18 when he died, and I suspect no one expected him to die as a teenager.
Catherine and a team of stonemasons have journeyed into the desert to carve a tomb into the cliffs. They want to discover whether Tutankhamun's sudden death meant there wasn't enough time to build a larger tomb.
It's assumed that they start building royal tombs when the pharaoh takes the throne. We think Tutankhamun came to power when he was about 9 years old, and we know he ruled for about 9 years.
To test the theory, the team wants to carve a tomb into the rock. They will investigate how far work can progress in a day to reveal how big a tomb could be after 9 years of continuous digging. They line up the entrance, then begin to carve. The work is hard and slow.
The ancient Egyptians couldn't have been much faster than this. They might have started with big stone hammers. They also, by this time of Tutankhamun, had bronze chisels.
Catherine assesses the progress after a shift of work.
The workmen have been working for about 3 hours. They've made a fair amount of progress. This is about where the corner was. You can see the red there. And in here is what, about 8 inches or so?
Catherine believes that at this rate, King Tut's builders would have had more than enough time to construct a bigger tomb.
Ancient Egyptian workmen probably worked on the tomb every single day because you'd work for 10 days and then another crew would come in. It's not like they had a weekend when nobody did anything. So skilled ancient Egyptian workmen attacking a wall like this could have made a great deal of progress in just a year.
This progress, scaled over time, would result in something far larger than Tut's tomb in just a few years.
Tutankhamun reigned for 9 years, so by rights, if they began the tomb when he was young, when he was first on the throne, he could have had a tomb the same size as any of his predecessors. He should have had a more spectacular tomb than that.
If construction time isn't the answer, then why is Tut's tomb so small?
It's possible they hadn't begun his tomb because he was so young. He was only 9 or 10 when he comes to the throne, so why would you start a tomb for somebody that young?
When the boy king died unexpectedly, the workers may have rushed to create a makeshift burial chamber. One theory is when Tutankhamun died, his tomb was just a corridor. It was then a race against the clock to finish it. The corridor was hastily extended, just 14 feet wide. It was the bare minimum to house his sarcophagus. Artists moved in to paint the resurrection instructions. One drew the rough outlines in red, another corrected them in black, and painted them with color. Workers lowered Tutankhamun's sarcophagus into position, and then sealed the tomb forever. The workers had a deadline to meet, one that could not be missed.
They would have had 70 to 80 days between the time he died and the time his mummification was finished. And whatever they were doing, they had to finish what they wanted to bury him in that amount of time.
Was the tiny tomb of Tutankhamun a postponed rush job? It's possible. But some archaeologists believe there's another explanation. Could it be that Tutankhamun's tomb was built for someone else? The Valley of the Kings. This rocky landscape was the burial place of Egyptian pharaohs for over 500 years. But entrance to this vast graveyard wasn't only reserved for kings. Non-royals, priests, even pets were buried here too, in smaller, simpler tombs. Could Tutankhamun have actually been buried in one of these so-called private tombs? And if he was, why? Today, archaeologist Donald Ryan is digging in the Valley of the Kings to find answers. He thinks that Tutankhamun's tomb looks suspiciously like the private tombs that he has recently unearthed. So far, these inauspicious tombs have revealed some striking secrets.
One tomb, just a shaft and a chamber. We have 13 sets of human remains in it. Another one, we found mummies of animals, including a dog, monkeys, some baboons. Every one of them is different. Every one is interesting.
But Don believes there are striking similarities between the small scale of Tutankhamun's tomb and these simpler private tombs.
There are several different plans for them. The simplest being a shaft that leads to a single room. There are others a little more elaborate with rooms off to the side and stairs. Some of the larger ones might have a pillar on the inside.
But Tut's tomb has one giant difference: his huge, elaborate sarcophagus. Inside the tomb stands the rare quartzite sarcophagus of Tutankhamun. Within it lies the 7-foot coffin, weighing over a ton, and gilded with gold leaf. But nested inside 2 Russian doll layers is a coffin of solid gold, decorated with gems. Finally, at its core, the mummy of the boy king, wearing a golden death mask for recognition in the afterlife. This royal entombment protected the boy king's body for millennia. Don explores inside an undecorated private tomb. He's never found a large stone sarcophagus in one of these tombs.
The tombs of rulers have a great sarcophagus, but in these smaller tombs, the coffins can be very, very nice, but they're not in large stone boxes with heavy stone lids on them.
Don is convinced that a small private tomb, just like this one, was hijacked to house the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun.
The tomb itself was probably not intended for him.
Inside the tomb of Tutankhamun, archaeologists find another clue. They believe that this chunk of rock, cut from one of the walls, is evidence of a string of blunders caused by conducting a royal burial in a tiny tomb. Giant gilded panels needed to be lowered into the tomb to form a shrine, but archaeologists suspect they were too big, and workers had to cut chunks out of the wall to squeeze them in. There is also evidence the sarcophagus lid cracked right down the middle, and workers had to fill the crack with gypsum plaster and paint over the damage. Then, when the wooden coffin was laid inside, it appears the lid wouldn't close, as workers had to chop off the toes to seal the mummy inside. And finally, when the tight-fitting flat-pack panels were placed around the body, they would only have left a few inches to spare for the workers to back out.
Many people believe that there is another tomb that was probably being prepared for him, but it wasn't ready, it wasn't finished. But here was a tomb that could be put to use for the unexpected burial of Tutankhamun.
If Tut's tomb wasn't built for him, who was it built for?
It fits the profile of a high-status private individual that is someone other than the ruler. Maybe it's a queen, maybe it's a prince, princess, someone obviously very special, but not the ruler.
Whoever the intended occupant, the tomb transformed the fate of Tutankhamun. That's because something else made Tut's tomb unique. It was found in near-perfect condition.
Almost every one of these tombs, with a couple of notable exceptions, was robbed in ancient times. But the tomb of Tutankhamun, it was found virtually intact.
Ancient looters stripped most of these tombs bare, long before they were uncovered by archaeologists. How did Tut's tomb elude robbers for over 3,000 years? The tomb protected the body of Tutankhamun for over 3,000 years. It even managed to defend his golden treasures from the Valley of the King's biggest threat: grave robbers.
Ancient Egyptians' monuments suffered a lot from the robbery activities everywhere in Egypt.
Archaeologist Essam Shihab understands the threat posed by thieves better than most.
We have very few examples for the intact tombs which found during the history of ancient Egypt.
Essam has explored many tombs in the region, but the mummies he recovers are always badly damaged and their treasures stolen.
The ancient Egyptians believed that they will have a life again in the afterlife. For this reason, they did their best to hide their tombs and buried their treasures.
The Egyptians went to great lengths to protect the tombs of their rulers. The tomb of Tutankhamun was no different. A false wall blocked off the burial chamber, and a plastered doorway sealed the tomb entrance. In front of it, 40 tons of rubble packed the corridor from floor to ceiling, creating a solid 25-foot barricade. A third doorway plugged the entrance securely shut, stamped with the pharaoh's seal. These 3 solid layers of protection were then buried beneath chippings to camouflage the tomb in the barren valley landscape. Were these defenses the reason that Tutankhamun was left intact? Essam isn't so sure. Today, he's investigating other tombs from the era of Tutankhamun in the nearby Valley of the Nobles. Most of these tombs had similar defenses to Tut's chamber, but all suffered multiple break-ins.
We didn't find anything belonging to the owner of this tomb because everything has been already stolen by the robbers.
Essam wants to investigate why the layers of security failed to protect this tomb. He already knows the most common ways thieves used to break in. Throughout the valley, the necropolis police stood guard. But at night, visibility was poor and the tombs were vulnerable. Robbers often bribed the guards to tell them where to find the entrances. They could then tunnel through the rubble and break the plastered doorways to get into the tomb. Later tombs featured 50-foot deep pits. But the robbers smashed the false walls and climbed through with ropes. They robbed all the treasures they could carry, then set fire to the tomb, using the inferno to extract the valuable gold leaf. But at the tomb Essam is exploring, things were a little different. Here, the main entrance remained sealed, yet thieves managed to steal all the treasures hidden inside. Essam is searching for clues as to how the robbers broke in.
We have excavated and noticed a truncation cut. They cut through the floor, trying to get into the tomb before getting the treasure.
Even if they couldn't find the entrance, the tomb raiders knew they could just dig down into the earth and hope to strike it rich. Essam heads inside and finds another clue.
We believe that this brick was made by the first robber who tried to get the treasures from inside the tomb.
Once they'd found the tomb, thieves smashed through the walls to find every piece of hidden treasure.
Here. We believe that this was robbery activity here. When the robber entered a tomb, he tried by haphazard way to cut into any place for finding the treasure.
It seems the grave robbers were so greedy and desperate to get inside, no defenses could hold them back. It was even common for tomb raiders to smash up mummies in the hope of finding valuable jewelry.
We have found loads of the human remains. They were found as fragments. We found lots of skulls, separate skulls, and we have found lots of different parts of the body.
Broken limbs, fractured skulls, and fire damage show how far looters went in their pursuit of treasure.
This brick could be as a result of looting the tombs, destroying the tombs, and everything inside the tomb.
Whatever the ancient Egyptians did to protect their tombs, thieves would find a way in. So how did Tutankhamun manage to avoid such brutal treatment with identical defenses? If the sealed doors and hidden entrance of Tutankhamun's tomb didn't keep robbers away, what did? Now, new discoveries suggest that a terrifying force of nature may have provided the greatest defense of all. The tombs of the ancient pharaohs once held fortunes in gold, but these riches didn't last for long. Tomb raiders smashed their way into nearly every chamber in the valley, stripping them bare, with one notable exception.
There are 62 tombs in the East Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun's is certainly the most famous of the bunch. It was one of the very few tombs, not just in the valley, but anywhere in Egypt, that was intact when it was found.
Egyptologist Kent Weeks is on the hunt for clues as to why Tut's tomb remained intact. He's spotted something interesting in photographs taken when the tomb was first discovered by archaeologist Howard Carter.
Carter had worked for many years in the Valley of the Kings before becoming, I would say, almost fixated on the possibility of there being a tomb belonging to Tutankhamun, who at that time was largely unknown, even to Egyptologists.
When Carter's men unearthed the tomb, they found it crammed with earthly treasure and items the king would need in the afterlife. 6 dismantled chariots, his childhood throne, and provisions of food and wine. 2 statues of the boy king stood guard by his burial chamber. Beyond the false wall, a massive shrine filled the room from wall to wall with the glimmer of gold. Hidden in the treasury, the king's internal organs lay mummified in a golden shrine. This trove of grave goods was left untouched for over 3,000 years. One of the few tombs in the valley to survive. Kent believes that photos of Carter's excavation hold a clue to how Tutankhamun's treasure was kept safe.
This is a photograph of Carter's workmen. It was here, eventually, they would uncover the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was in an area where nobody had expected anything, but that's because so much material had obscured the entrance to what turned out to be the most exciting discovery in the Valley of the Kings. Look at the size of these boulders, the size of basketballs, some of them weighing 50, 60 kilos each.
Kent believes these boulders weren't put there by the Egyptians. Today, he's looking for evidence of a natural event that may have buried Tut's tomb much deeper than its neighbors. Kent thinks a clue lies in the graffiti on this towering cliff face.
We know of about 2,000 graffiti here on the hillsides in the Valley of the Kings, and they record little bits of everything. And these are brief glimpses of what life might have been like back in ancient days.
Kent scours the cliff for the faint inscription.
My God, it's difficult. Yeah, this is it. It looks like nothing, but it is in fact a proper inscription. This is the record of a scribe who brought 3 of his sons here to observe the results of a flash flood.
Kent believes that a big flood would have dragged tons of boulders along for the ride.
Presumably, the waters washed off this cliff, bringing with it tons of flood debris, sand, gravel, limestone blocks, some of which you can see down here, weighing 100 kilos or more, and depositing a vast amount of water right here. An unusual enough event that he wanted to bring his children to come and see it.
Kent thinks that a desert storm may have triggered a flash flood, cascading water into the valley and over Tutankhamun's tomb. The river dumped layers of rocks and sediment over the closed entrance. When the hot Egyptian sun baked the mud, it set like concrete, sealing the tomb beneath. Years later, tomb builders unwittingly covered the area with stone chippings and built work huts on top. Over 3,000 years, more earth piled over, making Tutankhamun's tomb the safest in Egypt's history. Kent is curious to discover what effect a flash flood may have had.
We've been trying to figure out the flood patterns that occurred in dynastic times, where the water would go, how much of it is likely to hit in the area of Tutankhamun, burying the entrance of that tomb and concealing it.
He maps the valley to figure out where water would flow.
Right in the heart of the valley is KV62, the tomb of Tutankhamun. It's located in a very central position. If there is rainfall almost anywhere, that water is going to wash down into the valley at considerable speed and bearing a lot of flood debris right into the entrance of the tomb.
Buried beneath so much rubble, Tut's tomb would have been almost impossible to find.
When Howard Carter came along to excavate that area, he saw the workmen's huts, he saw flood debris below it, and decided initially there's probably nothing here. But he persisted in his excavations. He dug through a workman's village, through flood debris, until finally he discovered the tomb he really had been looking for all along.
Tutankhamun's treasure was protected by a flood, but that stroke of luck still doesn't answer all the questions. If Egyptians knew there was a pharaoh's fortune hidden in the flood-damaged valley, why didn't the ancient thieves go looking for it, just like Carter did in the 20s? Today, new research is unraveling a sordid tale of high politics and intrigue that could have safeguarded the boy king's tomb by erasing him from history. Perhaps nobody knew the tomb existed. The name, Tutankhamun, could have been deliberately scrubbed from ancient records.
Nobody had been looking for the tomb of this person. His name probably didn't even register on the list of pharaohs that earlier excavators were looking for. By most criterion, Tutankhamun would be an unremarkable, unimportant, almost unknown pharaoh.
Kent wants to investigate inscriptions in the vast temple complex at Luxor. Ancient Luxor was the religious and political center of the Egyptian empire for hundreds of years. The art on the walls represents Egypt's greatest rulers. Tutankhamun's name should be everywhere, but it's not. And Kent believes Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, is to blame.
Akhenaten's major changes were closing the temples of virtually all Egyptian deities. The temples played a very active role in the economy of Egypt. And so by closing the temples, he was in effect gutting the whole foundation of the Egyptian economic structure. So this affected almost all aspects of Egyptian society. It also presumably put a lot of people out of work. It was a traumatic time.
Kent believes Akhenaten was so unpopular that his son, Tutankhamun, was tarred with the same brush, and his name wiped from the temple. Kent finds evidence in a carving of a fresh-faced young pharaoh.
This is the beginning of the procession. Up at the top, a representation of the king.
He believes this figure can only be King Tut. But surprisingly, the hieroglyphs next to the picture read a different name.
Here, his name, Tutankhamun. It's been erased and replaced by his successor. The name is now Horemheb.
The carving on the right appears to be deeper than those around it. Kent sees this as evidence that the original name was chiseled out, and Horemheb's name was carved in the space.
One of the first things that Horemheb did when he took over the throne from young Tutankhamun was to try to expunge from the record any evidence of this heretical period.
Akhenaten and Tutankhamun were so disliked that Horemheb tried to remove all trace of them.
Later rulers, including Ramses II, went after this kind of work big time, erasing the name of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun wherever he found it.
Tutankhamun was scrubbed from the history books. So until Howard Carter came along, nobody thought to look for the forgotten tomb of the forgotten pharaoh.
It's ironic in a way that this young boy king, who didn't have any authority, who probably was sitting at home playing with his toys, became one of the most powerful symbols of ancient Egypt.
Because his tomb survived intact, Tutankhamun has risen from minor pharaoh to the most famous of them all.
On tomb inscriptions from the Old Kingdom onward, there are often texts that say, "O ye traveler, if you pass by this tomb and speak my name, I will richly reward you." Why? Because you could ensure the eternal life of an individual simply by repeating his name. And who of all the pharaohs in Egypt has his name repeated more often every day by millions of people around the world than Tutankhamun? Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun. He, above all other pharaohs, I think is guaranteed eternal life.
When the boy king died, his mummy was rushed into a tomb never meant for a pharaoh. This rushed job, a flash flood, and a final act of treachery transformed a minor king from obscurity into a modern-day legend. For 3,000 years, his mummy lay undisturbed inside his golden coffin, surrounded by hordes of shimmering treasures. He alone has stepped over his greatest rivals to achieve the goal of all pharaohs: immortality.
Naked History is brought to you by Element 18. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a comment below and subscribe to our channel for new videos every week.